My God, it's full of stars.
All right, there's One-Eye Jacks here. We got part two of the Roddy Piper They Live episode. So this would be part two. And something I forgot to mention in the first video is Roddy Piper's name in the movie is Johnny Nada. So once again, we have another John. So we have the category of Johns of toilets and Johns, and here's Johnny and Johns and Johnny Carson and all the Johns, Jacks, jocks in the puzzle. So Roddy, he wrestles in a ring. We have a category of wrestlers in the puzzle. He's John Nada, which means no. So he's Johnny No. So here we're going to see Captain Kirk in Where No Man Has Gone Before, which was changed to Where No One Has Gone Before, because no one's gone into space. And we have Gary Lockwood, the ex-bull rider, and he has the silvered eyes. And this is the second episode that's produced. The censors wanted more fighting. They wanted more fist fights. They wanted more confrontation. They didn't want any thinking, like we saw in the episode The Cage. They didn't want people thinking about the cage or anything. So the specific request was more fighting, more fistfights. They wanted to transition from the barroom brawls in the old westerns to the fights in Star Trek, and it was all about confrontation was the main thing they were concerned about. So Gary is exposed to something, and he becomes superhuman. He can control things with his mind, and we also have the woman who becomes Hot Lips Houlihan in the MASH movie. So we can tie MASH into the whiskey category with MASH. Sour mash is a type of how they make whiskey. You have BJ Honeycutt is a kind of whiskey, and you have they have a still right in their tent. So there's alchemy in the MASH movie. So The Cage they didn't like. They produced this episode, and this fight itself is 4 minutes and 40 seconds long. It's ridiculous, It's boring, but this is what the censors wanted. They wanted protracted fist fights and confrontation. So when we watch the movie They Live, and we see the longest fight scene ever in a movie, between Roddy and David Keith, or Keith David, I forget which. By the way, Keith David and David Keith are two actors. They form palindromes, and one of them stars in the movie The Firestarter, another Stephen King novel interpretation. So Gary and I can't even think of her name. She's Hot Lips Houlihan in the movie MASH. So she's the first female guest star, and Gary is the first male guest star on the second pilot for Star Trek. So remember we talked about pilots before. Susan Oliver was a professional jet plane pilot. She was an aviator, And she actually won some competitions in aviation, which I'm going to go over later in the video. And so here's the protracted fight between Gary and the second captain of the Enterprise, Captain Kirk. And this is where he gets his handmade shirt is now torn. So we're always using threads. So Danny has the handmade Apollo sweater, and the cashmere sweater is lost in 2001 on the space station. And you have the Minotaur and Theseus and the magic thread, and Sigourney Weaver and Hugo Weaving, and so Gary regains his power. And we're about 3 minutes into this fight, and it's so sloppily done. You can see the stuntmen from now and again when they're doing this fight that they're not even the real participants, and they actually spell his name. They say put it James R. Kirk, and his name is Tiberius Kirk, so it should be James T. Kirk. So there's a continuity error in the grave, and you have the gravestone, and he's about to get plugged. So Gary falls in the thing, the gravestone falls on him, and then it gets plugged. The big monolithic rock kills Gary. So this is not the first episode aired. The first episode that's the fight scene that's in the movie originates from the first Star Trek.
Definitely something I'll pick
with
up.
Captain with the first episode with Gary Lockwood in the fight with Captain Kirk. This is the episode that never airs.
There's still something out there.
And they're being lured to the Telosian planet now with illusions.
Well, for one thing, go home.
So here we see what he really wants to do. He wants to go home, he wants to ride his horses and relax.
Remember I told you I had 2 horses? We used to take some food. I said that's one place I might go. Bits. Could be parts
So they've
of a
been
spaceship
lured to the
hull.
planet.
Equipa landing party 6. The inhabitants of this planet must live deep underground. Probably manufacture food and other needs down there. Bits. Could be parts of a spaceship hull. Equipa landing party of 6. The inhabitants of this planet must live deep underground. Probably manufacture food and other needs down there.
Well, I've been to one World Fair. In a rodeo. And that's the stupidest thing I ever heard come over a set of earphones. You sure you got today's code?
So this is a reoccurring theme. We see it in H.G. Wells' book, They Live Underground. We see it in Kubrick's movies. You have the mine shaft gap, and we could easily convert some of our deeper mine shafts into living space. Dr.
I left the
Strangelove.
thermos hooked to my saddle.
We have Susan Oliver, a professional pilot, jet plane
Look,
pilot.
I'm sorry they punished you, but we can't let
Susan
My, it turned out to be a
was quite
lovely
the
day, didn't
aviator.
it?
And we have a category of pilots in the puzzle.
What's her name?
Mia.
Mia. How did Marcellus and her meet?
I don't know. However people meet people. She used to be an actress.
Oh, really? Did she do anything out of scene?
And I think her biggest deal was she starred in a pilot.
Pilot? What's a pilot?
Well, you know the shows on TV?
I don't watch TV.
Yeah, but you are aware that there's an invention called television, and on this invention they show shows, right?
Yeah.
Well, the way they pick TV shows is they make one show. That show's called a pilot. Then they show that one show to the people who pick shows, and on the strength of that one show, they decide if they want to make more shows. Some get chosen and become television programs. Some don't, become nothing. She starred in one of the ones that became nothing.
Here's our first look at the man-bear pig. It's not a man, it's not a bear, it's not a pig, it's a man-bear pig. So the Man-Bear Pig didn't work on Captain Kirk or Captain Pike. Here's the part in the episode where they scan the computer, and this film of this episode, this part is the part that's been edited out. So you can find this online, but you never find the original what was shown on the computer screen when they scan the computer. And the reason they don't show you that is because they show you the South Pole. There's a big picture of the South Pole, and they don't want you to see that. So we have number 1, Gene's wife. This is the only episode of Star Trek Gene writes. First, last, and only episode he writes. The only 2-part episode, episodes 11 and 12. It airs mid-season. Heavily edited. And the reason they heavily edited it is it's a little too close to what happens around us in the real world. There's the Mustang and the Corona. They use their tongues to deceive. So this would be NASA, you know, the serpent tongue.
Is under their lips, and their mouths are full of bitterness and curses, and in their paths, nothing but ruin and misery. And the fear of God is not before their eyes.
So this man's last name is Jocks. So we have another Jack.
The hearts and minds of our leaders.
Yeah, that's what they've done.
They have recruited the rich and the powerful, and they have blinded us to the truth.
So much like The Man Who Would Be King, if this story is true, we're being predated on by a more advanced race. Just like the movie The Man Who Would Be King, you have a more primitive race. It's essentially robbed and taken over by a more advanced culture. And they think the one guy is actually a god, so they make him the king, who would be Sean Connery, by the way. And so that's a John Huston. Or John Huston creation. So we have, here we're going to see a guy that's just completely mesmerized by the television. This represents a large portion of the population.
Excuse me.
So he's got his own tools. He's going to work on the side. He's not in the union, really.
This is a union job.
So we see the illegal aliens are working on the site, so he realizes that he can get a job.
So, then may I please speak with the shop steward? Sir?
Hey, there's no sleep.
So there's no sleeping on the site.
On this site, so you park your ass someplace else tonight.
Excuse me. Then when do I get paid?
So they're driving pilings in the ground for a new building. To get the pile driver.
You need a place to stay?
So Roddy kind of ignores him. You know, he's like, I don't join up with anybody until I see where they're going, which is really good advice. You know, I see a lot of people out there joining the Masons and NASA and all this other stuff, and they have no clue what they're getting into. You know, they blindly join a club without really even knowing what the club's all about, this is how the whole thing works. If you really knew what the club was about, you wouldn't have joined it.
I don't like nobody.
And we're going to see the Ford Maverick coming up here pretty quick. There's a Toyota Tercel, and then we have a blue Ford Maverick. Now, it's a 75, I believe. So it's conceivable it was on the road during this period. But once again, we have another, you know, we have the Corona, the Toyota Corona, we have the Mustang, we have the Maverick. Now we see a situation where there's a group of people living together, helping each other, and you know they're taking their efforts, combining them, and creating a small community. This is frowned upon, and this has actually happened numerous times in cities, especially out in California. I watched a program. All the homeless got together and they got this little piece of land and they cleared it all out and they planted a garden in there to grow food, fresh, wholesome nutritious food. And the city, of course, stepped right in and shut it down. That is not allowed. And the reason it's not allowed is because they don't want people working and living together and bartering for things and essentially circumventing the dollar bill. You know, if you can grow your own food, there's no money involved. You know, so that doesn't really fit into the system. So when this happens, even though it's like in the case of the California thing, the entire neighborhood was revitalized. It looked beautiful. It was all manicured. They had plants growing everywhere. And so, you know, before that, it was a garbage dump. So it wasn't that it had become an eyesore. It was because the people were working together. And this one I got to credit. Oh God, I can't even think. I'm gonna forget his name now. I'll put it in a little thing and it'll fly by here. But the song was identified.
Sometime back, the boys and I dreamed of the dance for the young people.
The bunny hop.
Things sort of caught on, so we thought we'd do it for you folks tonight. With a little help from the quintet and the Lee Morrison dancers, it's called the bunny hop.
So Roddy's playing the bunny hop. So that's interesting. You know, we have the hop, the step, the jump, the leap, the high jumper, the long jumper, the Operation Long Jump. You know, you have
hippity hoppity, hippity hoppity, hippity hopping over hill and dale. Da 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 da.
Dennis Hopper, Easy Rider. I mean, it goes on and on.
Recolored in 7 luscious hues.
And so we saw in the beginning of this part one, we saw where in 1960 the U.S. government was using subliminal programming on television. So, you know, it's 2018 now, and we have 120 hertz digital TVs. So if you think that they haven't figured out a way to hide messages in this stuff without you noticing it, you are deranged, because they've spent billions on mind control. And no expense is spared when it comes to fooling the public. So I can only imagine what things they've come up with that kind of technology. You know, they used to have, I think it was, I don't know, 30 frames a second. Now they have 120. So, you know, would you even see it? How would you even see it? They could put stuff in there you wouldn't even know. And we already know they did this already. And, you know, John Carpenter even puts clues into that entire 1960s sign-off. You know, here's the illusion of choice you have. This is how it works, though. We're indifferent. We're only focused on our own needs, our own selfish goals. We never work together. It's dog eat dog. This is not the normal state of affairs. This is a state of affairs that has been cultivated through this process of just making everyone selfish and only concerned with material things. There's no spirituality.
They are dismantling the sleeping middle class. More and more people are becoming poor.
That's what we are, essentially. We're their cattle. We can be used as food. We can be used as a workforce. We can be used, essentially, livestock.
The signal must be shut off at the source.
So there's the source. There's your, you know, independent media owned by the 1%. So when the people are watching it and they see some kind of truth leak through, they don't like it. They're like, I have a headache.
What the hell that's all about?
Yeah, it's the idiot licking his nuts again. So we have Rock of Ages. You know, it's a monolithic puzzle. There's Stones and Philip Stone and James Mason and Johnny Clay and Marianne Stone and Oliver Stone and they're singing Rock of Ages.
It's time to forget about breaking in on top of their signal. They're only going to jam us out again and again.
So these guys are realizing that no matter what transmitter they get and how they rig it, it's never going to be powerful enough to override the major TV networks. So I think what we're seeing here now is they didn't override the TV networks. They just slowly hid in things in these networks. And most people didn't see them because they weren't looking for them. But when you look at the mass shootings and how pathetically they've fallen apart and how many mistakes were made, you have to realize that at some point there are people inside the machine that are working to destroy it. They're throwing themselves on the Minotaur.
This world may have blinded me, but the Lord has let me see. You'll be back. You'll be back.
The helicopters are always hovering over. What's this now? This is weird now. I think this is the scene. Oh, this is where he has the escape.
Hey.
And we see a couple really weird vehicles. We see a Ford Country Wagon, a 1957 or 1955 Country Wagon, and we see a Barracuda,
and I plan on keeping it.
A Plymouth Barracuda.
I'm walking a white line all the time. I don't bother nobody.
Which is a fish.
Nobody bothers me. You better start doing.
So here we see what happens when, you know, people try to make a little better place to live in and work together. That doesn't work for the system. So when that happens, the system responds with, let's get this taken care of and clean out the mess. Sort of like cleaning an animal cage, you know, kick all these vagrants out, get them the hell out of here. If they resist, put them in the hospital or kill them. That's really how it works. And, you know, we do see this kind of thing in the real world all the time. During the Occupy protests in Wall Street, there you got to see what the 1% does when they're challenged by somebody. And what they did is they donated a bunch of money to the police, of course. And the police, you know, they took care of business in Wall Street. They made sure that the Wall Street protesters would not be hanging out there very long, because they would end up in body bags. And I'm not going to get into the details of it. You can do your own investigation. You know, when the Occupy Wall Street thing was going on, there was no concern for protecting the protesters. Oh, no, 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 no. The concern was for beating the hell out of the protesters. That was the main focus. So here we have a ramshackle community of vagrants, and they're just being mowed right over. There's no concern for their rights, or, you know, where are they going to find a place to sleep, or they really don't care. So here we go. You know, this is some clips from Occupy, and we get to see some of the stuff. You know, most of the real nefarious stuff went on at night, like when the kids were sleeping in the tents and they got hit over the head with a billy club 5 times while they were sleeping. That wasn't videotaped. So the police, and here's a girl getting her ass kicked. You know, she's unconscious and they're still beating her. Yeah.
But a tear gas
this
canister
is really
can be
screwed
lethal
up. They
if it
shot a
hits you
tear
in the
gas
face.
canister at a kid, hit him in the head. He's down.
If you doubt that the police were deliberately
and his friends
aiming
come
at
in
the
to help him.
protesters, watch this policeman when a group of protesters attempt to come to the aid of the injured person.
It's impossible to make. So yeah, here we are. We're in the frickus! We're in the frickus, man! Look at this! Wow, I think we broke some of the rules. Yeah. Here we are back in the movie now. Very similar. I think there's more violence in reality than there is in the movie, but... You know. Look at this. Yeah, get it on. Look at them. They're all out of control. Yeah, let's just drag this guy. Yeah. Ow. Ow. You know, so it's really close to the world we live in a lot of ways. And this window is weird. It's all these pieces of wood have been hand split and carved into little slivers. I don't get it, but this is another thing. If you look carefully at the next few clips, you'll notice it looks like the church is on fire, and you see smoke coming out, and like a wind coming from the church. And like in Kubrick's Puzzle, where there's smoke, there's fire. So you look at the church now, and look at that area over there. And, you know, you have marketing on TV. Yeah, look at the church. It always looks like it's on fire in this, in a few scenes, and this is one of them. There's smoke coming out of it. So we've got the polarized sunglasses, you know. This is the same thing in Lolita. We had the heart-shaped polarized sunglasses. And in The Shining, we had Wendy's one-step Polaroid camera. And, of course, the Blue Marble picture was taken on a Polaroid camera. And this is part of the movie I've gone over earlier in video 15, but if you look at the magazines and books, you've got Edgar Cayce on ESP, Two of a Kind, The Hillside Strangler, The Bermuda Triangle, and you've got a magazine on golf, you've got a magazine on Hollywood, and I'm going to list all these underneath the video and their significance and the dates.
I said, what's your problem?
And this is the first time Roddy gets to see, what's going on, and it's freaking him out. So we see the ESP and the Bermuda Triangle book by Charles Berlitz.
Thank you, sir.
So here we have a WikiLeaks for John Podesta, and it's from this guy Robert Fish at Earthlink, right? And we go down, blah blah blah. This is tucking your UFO files for future reference. And let's see where I want to show you. But this report did trigger the memory of another event that may have blah blah blah. So this guy mentions that he knew this guy who had worked on Project Blue Book, and of course it had been officially disbanded. So this guy worked for Blue Book after it had been officially disbanded. So in the movie The Shining, we see the Blue Book disappear in the Ranger, the U.S. Ranger, Forestry Ranger. So clearly Blue Book still continued after it was disbanded. Anyway, it says he was an electronic technician, intelligence guy, and they would go to Cuba and they would try to instigate them to turn their radars on and yada yada yada. And this guy talks about. He said there were times they were diverted from these missions to track UFOs off the east coast of Florida. His claim was that the UFOs had a landing takeoff spot in the ocean east of Miami, north of Bermuda. So this would be the Bermuda Triangle, so all these mysterious disappearances. What if the mysterious disappearances just happened to be that you were in the area when a UFO went into the little secret lair there? You can't have anyone seeing where the secret lair is. So if you're, a wayward boater and you drank a little bit too much moonshine and you float into the Bermuda Triangle at a time when one of these craft is going to go into the water or out of the water, and I think they just, they sink your boat or whatever, they transport you to the Nebula Star Cluster or whatever they do. So here we have this is real world, a real world leak from a really creepy guy, John Podesta, Mr. Pizzagate. And he's talking about UFOs and how they would monitor this area, looking for a specific electronic frequency emanating from them. And this can be found, just go right to WikiLeaks and type in Podesta Bermuda, and you'll find this. Is there a number on this? Not really. But anyway, so there's your Bermuda, connection. So what is going on, in the ocean off Florida? That's a good question. Charles Berlitz is also involved in the movie The Philadelphia Experiment, a movie about time travel.
Here you are, sir. Thank you.
Which is a recurring theme in these threads, by the way. Saturn is the god of time. Cronus. You have the Longines chronosphere, or chronoscope. It's a navigation clock.
Hey, buddy. You gonna pay for that or what?
So it's, we see these books over and over his shoulder.
Buddy, I don't want no half
and
of either pay for it or put it
they're
back.
always in clear focus. And the TV's going to teach you how to play golf and Now, something to notice in a lot of these shots, look for the satellite dishes. There's a little mini one there. And notice that they're pointed very close to being horizontal in a lot of cases, which doesn't make any sense because we're told they're supposed to be pointed at the satellites in the sky. And you could say, oh, they're all point-to-point high-speed links, but, you know, you don't see that in reality. You see them horizontal. I mean, I used to have satellite TV, and a tree grew up in my backyard, and it didn't work anymore. And I'm like, what is going on here?
She didn't even go to Lamaze.
So this is just, she talks about Lamaze class and the baby.
And for the baby. Go!
So that's a weird detail. We've got, clearly one of the aliens is interested in humans having babies. Well, then why would that be? Alright, here we got, he had a whiskey bottle in his hand. And I couldn't figure out which brand it was, but I know there's enough of the label that it can be determined. And of course we have the blue Firebird. You know, once again we got a Johnny DeLorean Firebird. And he doesn't want to put the glasses on, blah blah blah. And he does the body slam. And of course, you know, this is all wrestling move shit. So, Roddy's now a wanted man. You know, he's been a marked man. And this guy that walks by has the Stanley tape measure right on the back of his thing. He's got all the carpentry tools, and in his right hand, which is very difficult to see, he has a carpenter's saw, and he's holding it almost perfectly parallel to the camera, so it's almost invisible.
Wait! Hey! You better find yourself someplace to hide and keep praying nobody ever finds you.
Try these on.
So he's crazy, the ball busting. Yes, the ball busting. It continues. You know, NASA, oh man. And SpaceX, it's relentless. The ball busting they're going through right now. Roddy's going for the balls there.
You dirty motherfucker.
So yeah, the ball busting. The ball busting. I mean, how obvious can you get? It's literally ball busting. That's all it is. And it really fits into the whole struggle between the people trying to promote the truth, and people who don't. They become belligerent, you know.
How many people did you kill?
So they're not people, you know. Is that really that crazy when you see some of the stories that are coming out about Podesta and the Bermuda Triangle and you know, the entire ICBM arsenal being shut down by UFOs?
A long time ago, things were different, man.
My old daddy took me down to the river, kicked my ass, told me about the power and the glory. I was saved. He changed when I was little. Turned me, started
tearing.
So I ran away when I was 13. Tried to cut me once. Big old razor blade. Held it up against my throat. I said, Daddy, please. Just kept moving back and forth. Like he was sawing down a little tree.
Maybe they've always been with us.
Maybe they have always been with us.
Maybe they've always been with us.
Mr. Grady, you were the caretaker here.
I'm sorry to differ with you, sir.
We're on the farm.
The caretaker.
You've always been the
caretaker
of the farm.
I should know, sir.
So what if there really are bipolar twin sister race? They live underground, we live above ground. You know, is it really that far-fetched? This is mirrored in H.G. Wells, A Boy and His Dog,
Maybe they've always
Harlan
been with us.
Ellison.
There's a meeting tonight. Be at this address at 11 o'clock. Watch out no one follows you. The world needs a wake-up call.
So I think this is the design of what they've done. The world needs a wake-up call. And they piggyback the signal on the mainstream movies and TV. You know, all the TV shows, they're hiding little things in them. And it's a Trojan horse, you know, you can only do it for so long, and then someone's going to figure it out and go, okay, here's the hidden language, and here's the message, and the message is, you know, you're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. So you got, he's a wrestler, he performs in the ring, you know, he's a ringer. They ring the bell between rounds for the wrestling, just like the boxing.
Brand new.
So they give him contact lenses.
I mean it.
Holly Thompson.
And here's some weird stuff. The synchronicities are bizarre.
Security alert. Sections Delta and X-ray.
Delta and X-ray.
Floor immediately.
X-ray Delta 1. This is Mission Control.
Oh, it's Holly.
So you got Holly, and we have a category of woods. So you got Hollywood. Holly represents Hollywood. And we have to kill Hollywood to get out of this mess. So Vrati has the Desert Eagle pistol. Probably the most powerful semi-automatic pistol in the world. It's 50 caliber.
You and Holly clear?
And so he's got the Desert Eagle.
I'm clear. Are you?
Do I make myself clear?
So you got the McCleary Scotch in Pulp Fiction.
Are we clear?
Yes, sir. You can't handle the truth.
Are we clear?
So you have Crystal Crater. It's a multifaceted puzzle on Apollo 15 in the Icarus in the Dome crater. So Johnny Travolta, an airplane pilot. He owns his own plane.
Frank!
And he's a Johnny.
Holly clear? I'm clear. Are you?
And he played a Vinny in Mr. Cotter.
Don't do it.
And he played a Vinny in Pulp Fiction. A Vincent. Like Van Gogh.
Don't interfere. You can't win.
And he visited the Netherlands. So his name is Vincent, and he visited the Netherlands in Pulp Fiction. You know, the whole the whole Netherlands joke is Van Gogh cuts his ear off and gives it to his girlfriend as a gag gift. And we gave the petrified moon rock to the Netherlands as a gag gift because we never really went to the moon. So the ball in itself is a ball gag. It's a ball gag gift. So it's pretty clever. And the fact, you know, Vincent, he goes to the Netherlands and Roddy says, fuck it. And then they hammer him with the old Bushmaster. And then we see a laser beam, which is weird because satellite dishes don't use lasers, they use radio waves. And then Roddy flips him, the last thing he does is the bird. Gives him the bird. And we see the Bell Jet Rangers hovering.
The Oscar winners give a press conference, and how to buy a sailboat as prime news.
Like shit. I'm on it.
So the system goes down, everyone can finally see what the hell's going on.
Sex and violence on the screen has gone too far for me. I'm fed up with it. Filmmakers like George Romero and John Carpenter.
George Romero and John Carpenter. George Romero dies on July 16th, 2017, the anniversary of Apollo 11.
They're simply
filled with lightning. Yeah, so that's one of Zeus.
What was that, man? What the hell was that, man? Huh? No, man, like, hey, man, wow, I was watching this object, man, like the satellite that we saw the other night, right? And like it was just going right across the sky, man, and then, I mean, it just suddenly, it just changed direction and went whizzing right off, man. It flashed. You're stoned out of your mind, man. Oh, yeah, man, hey, like, I'm stoned, you know, man? But like, you know, I saw a satellite, man, and it was going across the sky, and it flashed 3 times at me and zigzagged and whizzed off, man. And I saw it.
That was a UFO beaming back at you. Me and Eric Heisman was down in Mexico 2 weeks ago. We seen 40 of them flying in formation. They have got bases all over the world now, you know. They've been coming here ever since 1946, when the scientists first started bouncing radar beams off of the moon. And they have been living and working among us in vast quantities ever since. The government knows all about them.
What are you talking, man?
Well, you just seen one of them, didn't you?
Hey, man, I saw something, man, but I didn't see it working here. You know what I mean?
Well, they are people just like us from within our own solar system, except that their society is more highly evolved. I mean, they don't have no wars. They got no monetary system. They don't have any leaders because, I mean, each man is a leader. I mean, each man, because of their technology, they are able to feed, clothe, house, and transport themselves equally and with no effort.
Wow. Well, you know something, man? I think, you know what I think? I think this is a crackpot idea. That's what I think. How about that? How about a little of that? I think it's a crackpot idea. I mean, if they're so smart, why don't they just reveal themselves to us, huh? And get it over with.
Why don't they reveal themselves to us is because if they did, it would cause a general panic. Now, I mean, we still have leaders upon whom we rely for the release of this information. These leaders have decided to repress this information because of the tremendous shock that it would cause to our antiquated systems.
However, I accept the need for absolute secrecy in this, and I hope you will too. Now, I'm sure you're all aware of the extremely grave potential for cultural shock and social disorientation contained in this present situation, if the facts were prematurely and suddenly made public without adequate preparation and conditioning. Anyway, this is the view of the council.
Now, the result of this has been that the Venusians have contacted people at all walks of life. All walks of life? Yes. It would be a devastating blow to our antiquated systems. So now Venusians are meeting with people in all walks of life in an advisory capacity. For once, man will have a godlike control over his own destiny. He will have a chance to transcend and to evolve with some equality for all.
How's your joint, George?
His attributes. The names in the end of this movie, I mean, it's just ridiculous. You got to Jason Robards III, by the way. Jason Robards is in the movie A Boy and His Dog, and you've got, you know, Thelma Lee, Wilson, Lee, Howell, Searle, Hudson. I mean, it's just so alchemical when you look at these names. Claudia Stanley. I mean, really? Costello, you got Elvin, you know, Abbott and Costello. Leopold is a telescopic sight maker. Oh, some of these are ridiculous. Sandy King, Kenneth Spencer. Spencer's a rifle. John Kennedy, John Kennedy, best boy electrician. Richard Dick Smock, you know. Robin Roberts, I love that one. Marvin March, you know. I mean, it's screaming alchemy. You know, John Young, William Lee, Diamond Farnsworth. So Mr. Farnsworth's the guy that invented the television, and then we have a Diamond Farnsworth. Right? Okay. Ben Scott. I mean, this thing is just screaming, you know, Kubrick's puzzle. Gary Epper and Earlene Epper. You know, not Pepper, Epper. What else do they have in here? I mean, I could do a whole video on just the names that they're showing you here. I don't know. These ones are kind of... you get the idea. I mean, this movie is, I don't know. I'm really on the fence. It's just, you know, Roddy Piper says that this is a documentary. And it is, I have to say, chillingly uncanny on how well this fits the model. You know, how could these secret societies maintain a secret that long? What if there is something behind it that we're not aware of? And it certainly looks like they are at least 500 years ahead of us in technology. So, anyway, that's the end of this. I know it took me a lot longer than I was hoping it was going to take, but I got called into work, and then we had 2 different blizzards, and then the snowmobile was calling. I had to ride the snowmobile, and the Goodyear Airship Columbia. Isn't that interesting? You know, the Goodyear Airship Columbia. But anyway, I just wanted to say we got a lot of really good got a lot of new subscribers. Even when I wasn't producing any videos, they were still getting subscribers. And Flat Earth is getting freaky. I got censored on Facebook the other day. You know, they almost put me in jail. Oh my God. But anyway, that's it, guys. Sorry it took me so long to do this is the last one. This is part 2 of 2. And the definitive They Live analysis. Carpe diem, guys.